Hi there, it's Gabrielle Nicolay from SpeechKids, where we teach little kids to talk and help parents understand their little kids. And today I'm very excited to be talking to Katie Gurwell. Hi, Katie. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Katie is a psychotherapist and a coach, and I'm going to let her tell you more about what she does. So, Katie, who are you and what do you do?
Okay, so I'm Katie, and I work out of Seattle, Washington. And really, I'm becoming more of a coach these days. I love working with entrepreneurs and leaders who are really heart-based in their work. But I come to this work from being a therapist, a psychotherapist. So I guess that's a good start, right?
It is a good start. It's always a good start.
Yeah.
One of the things that I'm really was interested to hear that you do in your practice is something called parts work.
Yeah.
And so can you just tell us a little bit about what that is and how it's used?
Yeah. So you know how when people say something like, well, a part of me thinks this and a part of me thinks this, or on the one hand, I feel this way, but on the other hand, I feel this way. That's language that we already use that's pointing to the idea that we all have multiplicity, which means we have lots of different parts of ourselves.
Okay, so I'm going to stop you right there because all immediately my mind goes, I have a multiple personality disorder.
Or, I know. I
know. So can you back it up a second and explain just why that's not bad? Do you know what I mean? Why that's not a disorder?
Yeah, it's not bad. It's not a disorder. Because multiple personality disorder is where you get really stuck basically in parts, and you're not you have a lot less choice. And it's not bad just because it's just how it is the thing. So here's another way to say it. Say you're feeling really angry about something. And if we think about parents and children, right? You're feeling angry towards your child. That's a part of you, but that's not all of who you are. And that's the good news, right?
That is really good news.
Or if somebody's angry at you, to remember it's a part of them that's angry at me. It's not all of who they are.
That's super interesting because that is in fact what allows us to be in relationship with people, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Otherwise it would be terrifying and it would be scorched earth, But you can for instance, you can love someone so much and be so upset with them at the same time. Or you can be deeply grieving something and also feel very joyful when you see, for me, it's these little blue jays that some people find annoying, but when I see them, I'm like, oh, there they are, So we can hold more than one thing at once inside of us.
And this is actually super important when we're dealing with kids because feelings change so frequently. And we can, in fact, have two feelings at the same time. I will never forget this moment. I had my 3-year-old son in the back of the car. This was years ago. And he was coming home from a week with my parents. And I said, are you happy to be coming home? And you can imagine what happened, right? This 2 looks in quick succession crossed his face and he didn't know what to say.
Shoot.
And he was he was sort of stuck. And I said, it looks like you're having 2 feelings, that you're happy to be coming home, but you're sad to be leaving Grandma and Grandpa's house. And the relief on his face.
Yeah.
The absolute relief of oh,
yeah.
that was okay. Right?
That's right.
And that it wasn't disloyal. I mean, I think that's the other piece of it. So if we're talking about parts work, right, how a piece of you can be so mad and a piece of you can be so, still have that real strong love. And that's not disloyal. That's not bad. That's not disorder.
That's right. Well, and when we think about 2-year-olds, or about that age. You probably know this better, but the age when they start to need to leave you, you know?
Yeah. Well,
Or
right. And between 2 and 3, 18 months to 3 is one of those. And then there's another one about every year.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like those kids are feeling many things, but in that dynamic, my imagination is that I need to go out on my own and not need you, and I still need you, like they're like doing this and then looking back to make sure you're there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So this is interesting. So from an adult perspective, and particularly, it's funny that you would bring up the parenting example, because obviously many of the people who will watch this are parents, who probably are also leaders and entrepreneurs, by the way.
Yeah.
When we become parents, we sort of add a part, don't we? But how does that play? Because I know there's a whole part of there's a whole set of stuff that comes up when we become parents.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, with my therapy clients, I talk about how I feel like you get more parts, or the parts that are about guilt and worry take up more space. I think that's a big piece.
What are some other parts that people have? Break them down.
Yeah, so in this way of thinking, there's a couple different types of parts, and then like a little bit of a subcategory. So and this comes from a type of therapy called internal family systems, which gets a little confusing because people are like, oh, you work with families. And it's like, no, I'm working with the family inside. So in this way of thinking, there's two types of parts. There's protectors, and there's preemptive protectors and reactive protectors. The preemptive ones we call managers, right? And so those are the parts
I have so many managers.
Yes, right? And managers are wonderful because they're the ones who like keep things going, kind of keep us kind of like, they're the ones that are like, okay, I need to keep my shit together, pardon my language. I need to keep my stuff together. They're the ones that keep maybe feelings from coming up that maybe will keep you from being able to function, things like that. So those are managers. So managers can be self-critics, and they can be quite extreme. They can be really judgmental of other people, and then they can just be good at helping us manage our lives. They can be the ones that like think a lot about things and help us figure things out, and then the other type of protectors, which are reactive, we call firefighters. And actually, I'll bookmark that. The second type of part, there's protectors, and then there's exiles.
Oh yeah,
exiles are the ones that like hold pain and shame and fear and distorted beliefs from past experiences. And if you get down to it, it's often like, I'm not lovable, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, things like that. But it also can just be being alone with fear for a long time, or like sadness or grief, things that just didn't get kind of metabolized at the time.
And so so I know there's a whole other set of sort of guys that parts that come up, but there's an interesting sort of split here, because you're a psychotherapist and a coach, right?
Yes.
So that gets to, and this is a question that I ask a lot of people, like, describe to me the difference between therapy and coaching, as it relates to the people who come. Like, why do I see a therapist versus a coach, or a coach and not a therapist? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, that's a really good question. In my mind, coaching is about like, we have a specific goal that you're trying to get to, and we're going to like work on helping you take steps to get to that goal. And using this parts work in relation to that is really about like getting really clear about what's keeping you in the way from taking those steps. For psychotherapy or counseling or therapy, it's kind of less goal-oriented and more like, you know, I mean, I still think it's quite goal-oriented, so I have a hard time at times like actually differentiating it. But it's like maybe your functioning isn't as going as well as you'd like, you know, so it's more about helping you get kind of your day-to-day functioning, you know, in your relationships or in work or at home or physically going better. So it's more dealing like with things like depression, anxiety, things like that. So for coaching, it's like and in therapy, sometimes it's a little trickier. It's like people maybe have kind of more stuff that's keeping them from actually being able to take the steps to help them feel better. So you're working more on that piece. Does that make sense?
No, that, I mean, to me it does, and hopefully to people watching too. But it is, right, you're dealing more on the therapy side, you're dealing more with sort of general function, like, do I function in my life? And then also, are there things that are not allowing me to take steps that I know would be good for me, and clearing those decks. And then, you know, and sometimes, I mean, myself included, right, I've gone to therapy for those kinds of things, and then I have also gone for coaching, for sort of optimization and actualization, and sort of, you
it's
know,
more of a refining and a tweaking.
Right, that's how it feels to me. So I think, you know, we sort of agree on that. So then that parts work, it's interesting, right? So you can use the parts work for the therapy side, but then you can also use it on the coaching side. And so now I want to go back to like the original question, which was, when we become parents, like what are there things that tend to come up when people become parents that, you know, block them or that get in their way, either in their personal life or at work for that matter?
Well, one of the first things I think of is just the fears that come up for parents. And some of that is, am I going to be like my parents if they were unbalanced in some way? And unbalanced, you know, people like to say dysfunctional, and I think unbalanced is a more helpful term.
So if something wasn't going right in your own childhood, you're going to have sort of, either you're going to reenact that pattern, or you're going to be worried about reenacting that pattern.
Worrying about reenacting that pattern, or actually reenacting it. So that's the big thing that comes up. And then if there's anything that's kind of still needing to be tended to in the parents' kind of story of their life, like they had something happen and they maybe didn't get all the help that they needed kind of processing it, then it's my belief that as their child meets that same developmental stage that thing happened for the parent, they're going to start to have feelings about it, or they're going to get triggered by their child. That's the therapy piece. That's certainly a therapy piece, right? I mean, so before I went to graduate school, I was a nanny, and I was still trying to decide what I wanted to do. I was like, do I want to be a teacher? Do I want to be a therapist? And one of the kids was 13, and I remember him being sassy with me or something. And the amount of anger that came up was like completely disproportionate to what was happening. And so I was like, okay, this is absolutely something of mine that I need to work on. That was one of those.
To that, I was about to say, how did you know that?
I'm not quite sure, actually. I think it was one of those moments where I started to get clear, like, oh, you know, we do a lot of pointing out, like that person and you, and if only you would change, I would feel better. But it was kind of a moment where I had a realization, and I'm not quite sure how, actually, where I was like, oh, I need to look in here. And maybe it was that piece of like, wow, this is really disproportionate, you know? So this can't all be about him.
Right. that's something that comes up a lot with the families that I work with, because they are, they're, many of their children are having either behavior or language kinds of issues that lead to sort of behavioral things happening, and they're hard to deal with. And so, when you get, when the adults get triggered by the child's behavior, and then everybody's just sort of ping-ponging off of each other, the only person you can really control in that environment is yourself.
That's right. And so, so the other key piece in this parts work thing is about helping folks tap into this resource that we all have within us that internal family systems, or IFS, will call self with a capital S. And I think Jungian folks calls it the same thing. And it's having these qualities of calm, compassion, clarity. They all, in this way of thinking, like lots of them start with the letter C. So it's like courage, confidence, connection. But it's love. It's being able to just be with, as opposed to like have an agenda. And so that's as you know, that's such an important piece of helping parents tap into, and it's what you do in your work as well, I would imagine, right?
Yeah, a lot. Yeah. So interesting. Okay, so when somebody's coming to you and they're an entrepreneur, for example, and they're trying to grow their business, why do they need to do internal family systems if what they're really trying to do is make more money?
Well, because like if we talk about money in particular, maybe they need to raise their rates.
Why?
Because they're not actually making enough money in what they're doing.
So why don't they just raise their rates?
Right? Exactly. Why don't they? So for a lot of folks, I mean, it can be so varied from person to person, but they may have a part of them that says like, I don't deserve that, or that's selfish, or other people don't make that kind of money. Who am I to make that kind of money? Or, things like that. So
money's such a big one, isn't it?
Money's a really big one. I mean, it's a really important and complex topic. So what we want to do is we want to kind of work with the parts directly from this place of being with, just being able to be with, to find out like, what is the fear, and what, is there stuff that's a little bit frozen in time that we can unlock so that they feel more freed up. Like for instance, I have a friend who's started to date, but she has a part of her who comes up and says, I don't have time to date. Like almost as soon as the idea of dating comes up, it's like, I don't have time. But we were talking about it, and I was like, well, like, what else are you doing in your free time? Are you reading books? Are you watching TV? And she's like, oh yeah, like I spend a lot of time doing all these other things. And it's like, well, you do have time. So like, where's that come from? And like really kind of working with that to not just have insight about it, because here's the thing, a lot of my clients have a ton of insight, but they're not able to do it differently. Or feel differently. And so it's like really about helping to unlock that. So that's the thing with entrepreneurs. And being an entrepreneur or a leader is intensely personal. Your stuff is going to come up when, if you like want to put yourself out there in that way. As a leader, like C-level, or even like any kind of leader, if you move into a management position of any kind, you instantly become a great projection object for the people that you're leading, for their authority issues, their issues with their parents, things like that. And so needing to work with that piece, it's really different to like have peers at work and work with them. But when you're the one having to lead, then that's different. And a lot of times people come up from the ranks, right? and they're really great at their job. And so that's why they become a manager or a leader. But then that's a whole different skill set, you know, how to hold on to yourself when people are upset with you or don't like something or things like that, how to hold a line with people, you know, when they're acting out, things like that.
And so then the IFS becomes a tool to sort of uncover what's standing in the way of changing behaviors around that.
That's right.
My
so that
thing
you're
is
leading
always,
with, so you're leading with more of that courage and competence and clarity and compassion.
my thing is always, I want everybody to agree all the time, and I don't want to, I don't want anybody to think bad things about me.
Which is like impossible.
Impossible. You can't be the boss and, you know, and not have somebody mad at you some of the time. It's
just, I mean, it doesn't have to happen all the time, but it's going to happen.
Yeah. It's funny because as I was saying that, I was like, yeah, parenting is pretty much the same way, right? Which is,
yes,
you have to, and so my guess is some of that stuff also comes up. Some of the same triggers, again, that come from being in a management position at work can come from being in a management position at home, right? Where,
oh, for sure,
you have to tell somebody who's going to be really pissed off with you and is not going to make any balance about showing, you know, they're not going to not show it. You know, you have to sort of hold the line sometimes. And then you also have to let things go sometimes. So that's a whole other thing.
Yeah. So like specifically for women, and again, this is different from person to person, but if we think of some generalities, it can be, you know, there's kind of people pleasing that goes on, kind of emotional overfunctioning, conflict avoidance, you know, and we play out all of those things that we've learned in our families and in our culture. We play those out everywhere. We just do.
Unconsciously.
Unconsciously, yeah. And so the parts work is really, I don't know if it's really true. I think I've heard, you know, that, okay, there's the 80-20 rule that applies to this, that like we're 80% of our behavior is actually influenced, is like run by the unconscious. And that 20% is conscious. It's like, I'm not sure if that's true, but it's probably a lot more than people think. And so the parts work is like getting to that unconscious material and bringing awareness to it, and also like clearing some of it. So actually you just feel different. Like I've had clients say like, oh, I was just able to advocate for myself and I didn't have to think about it. I just did it. You know?
Right.
So that's huge, as opposed to like being really like, okay, you know, and there's room for that too. Like okay, I'm going to do this differently. I'm going to say it differently and blah, 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 as opposed to like, you just kind of feel different. And then you're able to do it differently.
This is like neurological change you're talking about.
It's definitely neurological change. It's changing neural pathways. Yeah.
And sort of rewriting who you are at some level.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
It's super exciting.
It's so exciting. It's like we could go another 2 hours, but I'm going to leave it there. Like, thank you so much for coming.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for having me. I love talking about this. And I really, when I think about your parents, I'm just like sending them so much love and encouragement, because it is not for the faint of heart.
No,
being a parent.
Not at all. If people want to find out more about you, where can they do that?
At my website, katiegurwellcoaching.com. And I imagine you'll put a link as well, but it's, katiegurwellcoaching.com.
All right.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks, Katie.
Thank you so much, Gabrielle. Bye.